So DCEdEx stands for Decision Center for Educational Excellence, powered by the Helios Education Foundation. Helios is the largest philanthropy in Arizona, and they support Decision Center's work. Next slide. The strategy of the Decision Center is to take all the data, all we know about the education system, combine it with ASU and Helios's resources and stakeholders to change the educational outcomes of students in Arizona. So with data, we have partnerships with the Arizona Department of Education. Talking about social embeddedness, where we have 3, soon to be 4 researchers embedded in the Arizona Department of Education, helping them use the data that they are collecting and producing that they don't have the capacity to do at this time. We're also, through the Department of Education, we have an agreement with Assist, which is, it collects all of the course data of everyone who takes courses in community colleges and state universities in Arizona, and keeps track of their degrees and certification and their majors. And we're able to connect data that way. Again, they don't have the bandwidth to do all the analysis that they'd like to do, and we're able to connect that data and do some of those. So we also have data agreements with the Charter School Association and some other groups as we try and pull information together in ways that hadn't been done before. And as we do that, we incorporate the power of ASU. So our agreement with the Arizona Department of Education is a joint agreement between the Decision Center, which is in the President's Office, and EOS, and the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College. So the Teachers College also provides someone to work down at the Arizona Department of Education. We have lots of participation by students from the College of Engineering in industrial statistics and software design and other things. We work with the Decision Theater to help inform decision makers, people looking at our data, visualize it, and let them look at different options and things that could be changed, and make decisions in that 7-screen theater, which I'll show you in a little bit. The Center for the Future of Arizona, the Next Gen Service Corps, they provide a lot of volunteers for us, and student volunteers from a lot of different areas. Lukas organizes those, and we've had students, an undergrad computer science student who was actually presenting last year at the in an education conference last semester. With stakeholders, we're bringing together and working with educators, and that's pretty obvious. You'd think that would happen, but also policymakers. We had the head of the Senate Education Committee, and we're showing her some of the things she can see with our tools. We work with politicians, such as the Mayor's Roundtable, which represent 19 cities in the state, and what their community data are. We've worked with nonprofit groups such as Expect More Arizona, and they have a project with, I think, 16 communities, and we're providing data to them with Achieve 60, and we provide data to some of those schools, to the College Access Network, and we're working with a number of schools that they have as a partnership with the school administrators and other groups. So it really is embedded in those groups, taking the data, taking the power of ASU, and helping those groups and others think about what's going on in their communities and their schools and how we can improve. And what I'm going to talk about today are ways we are creating opportunities for communities to have informed decisions to create significantly better student outcomes and improved economic, social, cultural, and health outcomes for the communities we serve. This center was the brainchild of Michael Crow, and he's very clear that he said, your goal is not to publish research. Your goal is to find things out, get it out to the field, to the policymakers, to the educators, to others, and help improve the outcomes in Arizona. So the first thing we did, Arizona has 7 progress meter goals, and they're at the state level. And having been in a school district for a long time and working with other East Valley school districts and a group called the East Valley Partnership, we were always calculating by hand, what is that goal locally? What is that goal for the East Valley? And so people really did not have information on how that goal worked locally. In Gilbert, for example, the north part of Gilbert is in the Gilbert Unified School District. The south part is in Higley Unified, and they have a number of charter schools. So if you're a Gilbert person, there's no place where the Gilbert data is collected that of all the schools in your city, how are they doing? We did that. We created a tool that allows people to look at that. In this screen on the top left, you see for the progress meter goals, third grade reading, proficient in third grade reading, proficient in eighth grade math, high school graduation, and going on to post-high school enrollment after graduation. And this data is for Prescott. And as you look at it, it doesn't look too bad, but then you can break it out by subgroups. So I did this in the town of Gilbert, and we had 64% of the students were proficient in third grade reading, which was pretty good. And the Chamber of Commerce event, and they thought that's really good. But then when we looked at subgroups, only 31% of the lower income students from lower income households were proficient in reading. So there was something that they could really target to improve the outcomes in their community. So then what they also can do is, when I was in Gilbert, they said, well, show us Chandler. Well, if I was in Prescott, which we're showing here on the left, on the top right is Prescott Valley. We could also see it by school district and then even break it down by school. So here is the results for Prescott High School. So communities can really start talking about these goals, talking about what's happening in their community, and then what do they do about those goals. And this was the first effort to use data that we had available to help improve community conversations. But now I want to describe the second tool that we created. So the decision theater it's called a drum because it's kind of a round room where they have 7 very large screens that you can put data on, and as you talk about what ifs or you want to change certain values, all the screens change and you see the impact of changes you're proposing in real time. And you can fit about 20, 25 people in the room, usually decision makers and that sort of thing. So we've created an application that can be used in this tool, but it's also available online, and I'll talk about that later. So anyone could see it. My thought was, you can't expect everyone to come to Tempe. You have to go to Thatcher. You have to go to other places to engage communities where communities are, and so that's why we're doing it online as well. So let me get into this in a little detail. So this tool was designed to get communities talking about college going and high school graduation. And so the communities would come in and we talk about, okay, what do you want to talk about? Here we have data from Prescott schools, and the horizontal line with the 90 at the end is the goal of 90% graduating high school in 4 years. The national average is about 84%, so it's a little bit higher than the national average, but not too much higher. The vertical line that ends in 70 is the goal of getting 70% of students into some post-secondary program after high school. And the national average is pretty close to 70%. Sometimes it's 70, sometimes it's 67. It depends on the year, but that's kind of average. And our goal is to be nationally average actually in that area. In this case, you can see that many of the schools in Prescott are at 90% or very close to 90% graduation. So they may decide, hey, let's talk about college going. And these bubbles, by the way, are every high school in the state that has a high school graduation rate and a college going number. And the size of the bubble reflects the size of the schools.
And just a quick note.
What do we, yeah.
Yeah, Joe, just a quick note. The college going rate here is the college going rate of those who graduate. So if you see some bubbles down here that are saying there's only like a 50% high school graduation rate, and then maybe only a 30 or 20% college going rate, that's only 20 or 30% of the students who graduate. So we're seeing very low numbers in these groups.
And those two big bubbles at the bottom are online offerings, schools that just have students online, and you can see that very few are graduating from those particular schools, and of those who graduate, very few then go on to college. So that big bubble at about 20%, you see a little less than 20% of the students graduate from high school in 4 years, and about 20%, or 1 out of 5, who do graduate actually go to some post-secondary education. Okay. So to make it customizable to a community, we've created in the first of the 7 slides, you get to decide where you want to look. So when I was out in Yuma County, we looked at just the schools in Yuma. When I was in Mojave, we looked at the schools in Mojave County. In this example, we have schools in the Prescott area. And I was going up there to work with those schools as a part of Achieve 60, which is a nonprofit group. And so that's where this particular slide comes from. So on the left-hand side, you can see you can choose schools based on a lot of characteristics. You can choose whether you can choose online schools and non-online schools. You can choose charter schools and just see the charter schools. You can choose based on what % of students are in ELL students, what % are special ed, what the school lunch rate is, which is a kind of an indicator of poverty, the ethnicity of students. So give me all schools that have 20% or more Native American students, and I want to see how they compare. You can choose just rural schools, suburb schools, those sorts of things. And you can choose by community characteristics. So show me schools where very few adults have attained a college degree, or show me where a community where the median household income is low. So you get to really customize what you're looking at and who you compare to. And that's the power of this in terms of working with communities. So once you've chosen your location, then you see some community influences that you need to think about. The slide on the left is earnings and employment by education level of the adults. So the first is less than high school. And we have here the large bar is employed, the small bar is unemployed. That really hasn't been an issue up until this month, when I think the census data may change a lot depending on what next time it comes out. But that's what that represents. So, and the red line represents the average earnings, the median household earnings for people with that education level. So you can see the Prescott area has a lot of people with associate's degrees or some college. That's the largest bar. The next largest is just a high school graduate. And the third largest is someone with a bachelor's degree or higher. And most of the associate's degree or some college is just some college, and they never completed a degree. So that tells you something about what strategies you might want to have if you want to increase college going. What strategies do you have for those with less than high school, for just a high school graduate who don't know how to go through the college application process, et cetera? In the middle, the top graph shows Achieve 60 as a goal of 60% of the adults in a community have a degree or certificate of value. And what this graph shows is it increases, it starts in 1990, the 1990 census to the 2017 census. And the increase in size reflects the population has increased. But what you can see, and we don't have it here, if you're allowed to mouse over the different points, and it shows you how much the college going and college completion has gone from 1990 to 2017. So it tells the community, this is how far we've gone with what we're doing now to get to the 60% goal. And you realize how much more you have to do to get to that goal. And that really emphasizes we need to do something different than what we did before. The household income graph below that tells you about the community and what is the income of households in that community. And you can see that if you're thinking about college going, you're going to think about how do they pay for college. Those who make less than 30 or 30 to 40,000, okay, that's 45% of the community. If they're prepared for college, if they can meet the admissions requirements without deficiencies, those students could apply for Obama scholarships, for example, and have all of their cost of attendance paid for. So what's the strategy you do to communicate that to students and to make sure that they're prepared. The next two groups, the 40,000 to 100,000, are kind of the teacher groups, teacher families. And there you see 42% are making between 40 and 100,000. Some of those families think there's no money available to them, but ASU's data shows that they do get significant significant funding, not complete, from ASU. So what are the strategies they need to know that will enable them to go to college and afford college? And then you can see the higher income families. On the far right side these shows the 10 major industries in the Prescott area. This is here to get people to think about, if students are thinking about what they want to do in their life, what they often think about is what they see. And these are the jobs that those students see. If you want them to think about an engineering career, do they see an engineering type job somewhere in their lives? And they're not going to see it in these jobs for the most part. In fact, many of these jobs are lower paying jobs. So this gets you thinking about, okay, what do we have to communicate to the students in terms of what their possibilities are in college and beyond? The field of bachelor's degrees, and we don't have that showing here, shows all the people in that area that have different bachelor's degrees, engineering, math, a variety of different education, business, etc., that are the census data and what the categories they use. So you can see who might be available to be a mentor, or how many people you have with different degrees that you might try to tap as part of your strategy. So this tells you a little bit about the community in which the schools exist.
And we're going to show you the tools functionality here after we're done with the presentation. So we'll be able to click through some of these things as well here shortly.
Okay. In this slide, there are three different ways of looking at contextual influences on schools. For example, households with children under 5 in poverty. That's your farm team. How many students are living in poverty compared to the Arizona average or the U.S. average? And we did this in terms of percentiles. So, this selected area is actually less poor than Arizona as a whole. We have grandparents raising children. We have air pollution, and because that's associated with asthma and absences. We have some household factors like how often households in the area move, and other things. So these are things that schools don't control, but affect schools. And then the community also gets to benchmark their schools against other schools. Each dot, again, is a high school in the state. And on the left-hand side, it's percentage going to college compared to free and reduced lunch rate, which is a lower income indicator. And you can, if you look up and down, you can see schools of similar free and reduced lunch rates, and you can see the college going. So the schools in Prescott are in white, and they tend to have higher college going than schools with similar free and reduced lunch rates, is what you can see here. You don't see all 5 schools because probably 2 of the schools don't offer a free and reduced lunch, and so there's no free and reduced lunch rate. On the far right side, you can see the percent of students going to college by FAFSA completion. And you can see the positive relationship, probably because FAFSA completion is a leading indicator. It doesn't cause it, but it probably reflects a lot of things schools are doing to try and get students to go on to college. The other thing you might notice there is that the FAFSA completion rate is usually lower than the college going rate. So not everyone is filling out the FAFSA who are going on to college, and you're not going to be considered for any financial aid in most institutions unless you complete a FAFSA. And this is benchmarking high school graduation on the y-axis versus, and we already saw the top left one earlier, versus college going, versus chronic absenteeism, what percent of students are absent 3 weeks or more during the year, suspension rates, how many students are suspended, okay. And on the lower left-hand side, what percent of students are proficient on AZ Merit English test, which we found was very highly correlated to the ACT College and Career Ready Index levels. And you can see there are 2 schools there that have less than 20% proficient, but have very high graduation rates. So are those students going to be prepared for some post-secondary education? And you might, as a community, have discussions about issues such as that. And finally, the community, this is really where the rubber hits the road. This is when the community starts talking about, okay, what do we do to improve college going? And what we have here are some suggested things that people could do to increase college going, research-based, and get the community to come up with a goal for the community. What I did for this area, the goal is 70%. They're already at 73.4%, that the second to bottom indicator. So I said, well, let's get to 80%, because if we want the state to be at 70%, we have to have areas that are above 70% to offset areas that are not going to get to 70%. So for the Prescott area to increase college going to 80%, that would mean just 72 students, 72 more would have to go on to college. What's the implication for the students? They're going to make almost $23 million more in their lifetime earnings over what they would have made as just a high school student. And that assumes, in proportion to what we see in the state, some will just have some college and never a degree, some will have an AA, some will have a BA, some will have a higher degree. And they're going to generate over $7 million in taxes that go to state, local, federal governments. So for the politicians and the policymakers, there's a reason to do this too. So you can use this tool later. I think if you click once, it should come up. Here's my email, joseph.o'reilly@asu.edu. And if you email me, I can give you access to it and give you a user's guide, and then you can explore this yourself if you want. But as Lukas said, in the next slide, we're gonna use this ourselves. So we're gonna change.
And I just put Joe's email into the chat box as well, so feel free to grab it from there.
Okay. So is there any community that anyone who's participating would like us to take a look at?
Oh, Mesa? Okay. So we can just type in Mesa here at the top.
Okay, and I assume you want the city of Mesa, which includes schools in Gilbert and Mesa, but if you do Mesa, it'll be the city of Mesa, because in Arizona, school districts are not contiguous with cities and towns. Okay.
And you can see all the selected schools here in red.
And those down in the lower right that are down by Williams Gateway Airport, and those are actually Gilbert schools and maybe even a Queen Creek school. Okay. Okay. So here we see the educational attainment and the household income by educational attainment for the city of Mesa. And you can see, like Prescott, they had the biggest group is AA degree or some college. So there's a lot of people who have part of a degree, have gone to college, but have not gotten a degree. So from an Achieve 60 point of view, that's a ripe group to try and get to complete their college degrees. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see there are 26,000 high school students in that area. You can see the ethnicity of the adult population. And then you can see the income of households within Mesa. If you did Mesa School District, you'd see a very different pattern, because it would be cutting off the area that goes down into Gilbert. And so the Mesa School District is higher Hispanic and higher poverty. So who you choose is an important decision you make at the beginning. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so Mesa has grown from just over 200,000 to about 300 and some thousand adults, not including the students. And these are adults 25 to 64. And this is their degrees. So we're not at 60% in Mesa. Okay, you're at like 35% or so. And since 1990, the percent of people with a associate's degree or higher has increased 1.27%, bachelor's 2.64, graduate or professional degrees 2.5%. So it's gone up, but not at a rate that's going to get you to 60%. Now, this doesn't include certificates because those are not well collected, but you can assume generally there might be about 10% getting certificates. So still a lot of ways to go if we're talking about achieving 60 within Mesa. You see over here the major employers in the area. Finance and insurance is usually a big, pays more than some of these other areas. But they're a mix of lower income and higher income schools. In terms of bachelor's degrees, okay, you can see what are the major areas. In a lot of communities, business and education are two of the larger fields of bachelor's degrees. And if you hover over like engineering, just for 1 second there, so you can see what's in it, you can see exactly how many engineers there are from census data for Mesa. Okay. So here we have, you can see air pollution is not a major issue in Mesa, but it's higher than the state as a whole. The state is kind of wide open. So lead paint, older houses. Mesa has fewer older houses. Exposure to violence. Mesa is above the nation, but below the state average. And childhood factors. You can see that there are a lot of students under 5 in poverty. If Mesa was a census tract, 40% of the census tracts would have worse poverty than they would have, but 60% would have better. Okay, and the last one, the household factors. Okay, so yeah, you can see the married teens, households who moved, adults without health insurance, which research says if the adults don't have health insurance, even if children have it, it's not going to be used as much. And then the percent using food stamps, that's associated with food stamps have not kept up with inflation, so they cover about 3 weeks. And in week 4, research says students start to act out in class, and then you start to see an academic impact shortly after that. So what are the things that could be done to address that? Because that's not necessarily a school issue. And in Mesa and East Valley, one of the things is Arizona Brain Food, which gives kids bags of food to take home over the weekend. So that's a type of strategy that locally you might want to use to address this issue. And now let's see how the school district is doing compared to other high schools in the state. Okay. And as Lukas goes through these, you can see these if you were looking up and down in schools with similar free and reduced lunch rates. Generally, these are lower than similar schools. So you'd want to say, okay, what are other people doing that would increase our college going? And it's not necessarily just because our students are poorer, because schools with similar rates of poor students have a lot more college going. So what do we do to improve? And on the right-hand side, you can see FAFSA completion. And that, okay, Sequoia is a charter. Okay, here's Basis Mesa and ASU Prep. Basis Mesa, you can see, he just showed you, is almost at the top. And those students are at Eastmark, which is a very high-income area. They're probably not poor kids, but they're filling out the FAFSA. Why? Because Basis knows to get any financial aid, you have to complete a FAFSA. If you're going to go to a private school, you're not going to get any financial aid if you don't complete a FAFSA. So they make it a priority. Whereas what we see throughout Arizona is the traditional schools. They make sure the lower income students complete a FAFSA, but not everybody. So that's why there was earlier a presentation about the Project Benji. That's what they're trying to address a little bit in some of their work. And I see Carla Robles is on here, and what they're doing with their program, I think is, I know you've been in Mesa, so helping to get students to go on to college is, all those things are helping these students. Good. So you can see here as it goes through how the high schools are doing. There are some high schools that are at the 90%, but a lot that need to go up in terms of high school graduation to get to the 90%. So you can see, yeah, those right over there, it's not where it should be. And so I know that the schools have been working on that. Chronic absenteeism is to the right. There's one school all the way on the far right that has they're saying almost everyone is chronically absent, and that may be an alternative school. And there are actually a number that are at 100% on the far right. That could be true, or it could be they misinterpreted the question and reported the data incorrectly. Suspension rates are not high for most Mesa area schools, but there are some with higher out-of-school suspension rates. East Valley High School is a charter, and East Valley Academy is kind of a credit recovery high school in Mesa. Okay. And Sun Valley is kind of an alternative school. And then finally, graduation rates compared to achievement. So you have some schools with very high achievement and high graduation rates, some with above average for the state achievement and high graduation rates, but then you have some that are lower graduation rates and lower achievement. So if we were working with a community, we'd talk about, okay, what needs to be done to address some of these outcomes? What are the things you will have to do as a community to address some of these outcomes?
And just a quick note, so this is for the 2017 academic year. Just because of the availability of data, we'll continue to update this tool with more information as it comes out. But I know that Mesa and several other areas have been doing significant programs to increase their FAFSA completion and their college going rates. So these numbers may have changed a bit since this 2017 data, but it gives you a little bit of a benchmark to think about where you were or where you currently are. Right,
and I think the graduation rate has gone up. I know it went up 4% last year, which is a really high increase. Or the 2018 year, the 2019 year, I don't think has been made public yet, so I don't have that. And we are posting. We have a student volunteer who's created some Tableau visualizations, which we'll be posting with more recent data, so people can then go look at that to say, okay, how has it changed? The education data comes out much more frequently or quicker than the census data. So this brings us to the last slide. So 49% are going on to college or some post-secondary education after high school. And this comes from the National Student Clearinghouse, which is not just colleges and community colleges. It also includes some technical schools. When I was in Mesa, Earl School of Beauty was in our National Student Clearinghouse report because they got student loans. They were part of that database. So for Mesa, and we're thinking about college going rate, well, we limited it to going up 20 percentage points, but let's go all 20 on this one so we get close to 70. And what would that mean? That would mean in the city of Mesa, we'd have a little over 1,100 more students going on to post-secondary education. That would have a huge impact on the lifetime earnings of those students and on the money that's available to government to provide services for those students and others. So there is a really big payoff for getting more kids to go on to some sort of post-secondary degree or training. And I have to add that their skills are appropriate for, and that it's a job that they would want to do. So it's not just getting people into college, it's getting people in and being successful in their future lives. So that's Mesa. Go ahead.
Yeah, we don't have a ton of time left, but there was a request for Maryvale as well. So we'll clear the results and go through quickly through those results and then leave a couple minutes for questions. We're also available to stick around a little bit after the session is over.
Okay. So I think, yeah. I think there's a Maryvale High School, right? We can also do it by legislative district, so that's another way of looking at this, or congressional district. Yeah, you can see a very different pattern here with most adults have less than a high school education, and the next highest is just a high school education. The least highest is bachelor degree, and the easiest way to increase college going is increase the number of parents who have a bachelor's degree, because their kids tend to go to college. High poverty, very Hispanic. And if we keep going, okay, let's see what that is in terms of, okay, in terms of degrees, like 8%, it's at about 8% with degrees now, and that has gone up.
It's actually gone
3
down.
or 4 percentage points. Well, graduate degrees have gone down, but the associates have gone up, kind of offsetting that a little bit. Yeah. The troubling thing there, which we don't see in most places, is the less in high school has gone up from 1990 to 2017. Okay. And the challenges that they face, household factors, if you want to do childhood factors. Okay. And the darker shaded green reflects it's higher than the state average. So more kids in poverty, more births to unmarried teens. Okay. And then the environmental factors that affect Maryvale, all of them are in darker green: higher air pollution, higher lead paints in houses associated with brain development in infants, and exposure to violence. So there are a lot of challenges in there that are affecting students that are out of the school's control. And here you can see Maryvale compared to comparable schools. In terms of college going. And then if we look at the high school outcomes. Okay. So 88% graduate, is that the?
83%.
83%, yeah. Okay, well that, not a very high absences or suspension rate, but also not a very high rate of proficiency on the AZ merit. So not as well prepared for college as they need to be. And there are a lot of, as we saw, there are a lot of factors that contribute to that. Okay.
If we got them to a 67% college going rate, though, it would only take 124 more students to see $40 million more in and $12 million more for state and local governments. Okay. Well, we'll clear these results and show you the stable, but right now we're going to open it up for questions. Are there any questions right now? Need to either unmute yourself or post them into group chat. Continue to walk us through this a little bit as they come in.
And we're adding 2018. The 2018 census data just came out in late December. And we're still waiting for the civil rights data collection to be released to add that in for 2018. we're waiting if there are no questions, but what the feedback I've gotten on this is really good because it's information that we knew was out there somewhere, but no one's ever pulled it together. No one's ever put it in a place where we could then use it to talk to people about what's going on in our schools. One district's using it to train new principals who are coming in as to what is the community that their new school is. What are the characteristics? Another one's using it for writing grants and actually for helping explain to the staff why it's hard to get a override or bond passed, because the community is mostly white and retired, and the student body is mostly Hispanic and lower income. So there's really not the connection with the school. There are a lot of different ways people have talked about using this. So I think the purpose is engage people, have informed discussions, and that's what this tool is supposed to do.
You can see on this slide here that we do the percent of reintroduced lunch as our process for students who are in poverty versus the college going rate. And as we were saying, you can compare to similar that are on the same lunch rate. We tend to take a look at these schools up here as overperformers and trying to understand a little bit more as to why that's the case. So we're having students kind of dive a little bit deeper into what are these schools doing differently to San Luis High School, who you would predict based on their pre-reduced lunch rate to be in the range of a roughly 40% college going rate, yet they're at the state average here. So what are they doing differently to get them up the curve? But we're asking that question, and a lot of questions with the students that we have within the center.
And we see that actually, we see it in San Luis, which is just south of Yuma. We see it in some of the other big ones there. Yuma, Culpa was the one you went over, Nogales, and to some extent Douglas. The border schools are graduating at higher rates than comparable schools and sending kids to college at higher rates. So what is it about those communities and about the offerings and the post-secondary in those areas that lead to those outcomes? And that's something that we're looking into. And actually, we have a student doing a study on Santa Cruz County, which includes Nogales.
Well, it looks like we're roughly on. Again, as Joe said at the beginning, if you're interested in using this tool, just feel free to email Joe, and he will give you a login to be able to use this tool and send over a user guide as well to help you facilitate this on your own.